Okay, Chris Speaks here with Brandon Mosley for our BCS State of Alabama podcast, and we've got former Congressman Mo Brooks, who just released a bombshell report a couple of days ago. So, Congressman, have
Yeah,
you ever
Mo is
seen
running
any?
for state house.
Yeah, running for state house again. Have you ever seen something of this level before, trying to buy votes?
I cannot recall something this surprising out of the blue and this large, so close to an election, suddenly coming to light. And I've been around in the legislature, county commission, United States Congress, Madison County District Attorney, Tuscaloosa Assistant District Attorney, and I've never seen anything like it.
I've been involved in elections in Alabama since 2002. I can't recall anything like this at this scale.
Well, suddenly out of the blue to have what is probably in excess of 3 million and might be in excess of 4 million trying to buy legislative elections and perhaps statewide elections, that's just unheard of. And for it to be out of state and out of country, gambling moguls who are at the heart of it, financing these efforts, laundering their money, sometimes illegally refusing to comply with the Fair Campaign Practice Act's disclosure requirements, involving the House Speaker's office with his number one lieutenant being one of the people who's involved in laundering $250,000 of it from these gambling moguls to, wherever it's going to end up. Probably candidates, but it could be something different. It's just amazing.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I've been trying to chase it down as much as I can. Obviously, they're against you in your race. They're in the Moody House District 50 St. Clair County race. That's an open seat. They're backing Bill Morris over Brian Newell. I was told they're backing Lloyd Peoples over Jim Carnes in Vestavia. They're backing Greg Albritton down in Escambia County, Chris Elliott in Baldwin County, Francis Holt Jones in Baldwin County, Philip Pettis up in the Shoals, and
Garland Gudger.
Matt Simpson, and that's probably just a fraction of the races they're in.
Oh,
Yeah,
undoubtedly.
they sent out.
But for
Oh, I'm
clarity,
sorry.
we need to bifurcate something. These gambling moguls have divided the pot into two parts. One part is flowing through the Sports Betting Alliance, and it's $2.15 million. And we know that because the disclosures of the Sports Betting Alliance or the SVNB PAC out of Montgomery, that is one of the laundering devices, or the North Alabama PAC, which is another laundering device. But that seems to have been properly disclosed under Alabama law.
Then I'm just talking about the American Conservative.
Well, that's the other one. As of December 31st of 2025, just a few months ago, 100% of the American Conservative Fund's money had come from DraftKings, also known as DK Holdings LLC or whatever, out of Boston, Massachusetts. And that entity has failed in any way, shape, or form to comply with the Alabama Fair Campaign Practices Act that absolutely requires them to disclose January activity on February the 2nd, February activity on March the 2nd, and March activity on April the 2nd. They've done none of those things. Additionally, the American Conservative Fund is required by law to properly disclose the identity of the entity that is engaged in the political discourse, the advertising, okay? And they have also failed to comply with the identification requirements of the Fair Campaign Practices Act. And folks, this is criminal. Failure to comply in the nature of what it appears that the American Conservative Fund is failing to comply That is up to a year in jail and a $2,000 fine per occurrence. Then you've also got the Alabama Secretary of State that is empowered to impose civil fines on top of whatever the Attorney General or prosecuting district attorney may seek to impose at the criminal side of things. And so you and I and the rest of the people of Alabama are having to guess to some degree, estimate to another degree, which races the American Conservative Fund, i.e. gambling mogul DraftKings out of Boston, Massachusetts, is active in, and how much they are active in, and who they're supporting. And that's what the Fair Campaign Practices Act is all about, is to empower the voters to have a better understanding of who's behind these candidates so that you can in turn better understand what public policy positions these candidates are taking. They get the money from these special interest political action committees. And I would hope that the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, perhaps the Montgomery District Attorney, perhaps any of the district attorneys, they have authority under the Fair Campaign Practices Act, any of the district attorneys in which this illegal activity is occurring, they can step in and try to do the right thing and enforce the Fair Campaign Practices Act against these out-of-state and out-of-country gambling moguls. One of the entities, by way of example, that is a subpart of the Sports Betting Alliance is called Bet365. Well, Bet365 is a European company interfering with our elections here in the state of Alabama. There must be a pretty big pot of gold at the bottom of the rainbow that causes these people to engage in these surreptitious and somewhat sordid things that they are engaged in.
I've also found out earlier today they're behind Garland Gudger too. They're sending out text messages on his behalf. Have you received or have had a response from the Attorney General's office since?
No, I have spoken to Attorney General Steve Marsh. Of course, he's running for the United States Senate, and I've let him know what the problem is. I hope that he will act or have one of his assistant attorney generals to act. I don't feel comfortable describing any of the conversation on his side, but I'm happy to discuss the conversation on my side of that conversation. And that is, we've got a problem with violations of the Fair Campaign Practices Act that are very significant with respect to the American Conservative Fund. It's happening in a lot of parts of the state of Alabama. And gosh, if these gambling moguls are going to ignore the law with respect to the Fair Campaign Practices Act, what other laws do you think they're going to be able to get away with? Because if they are this active going forward in Alabama elections, who knows what office holders they're going to be able to influence or buy with the money that they're going to reap from the gamblers that lose to the House in the state of Alabama. You know, we have a long history here in the state of Alabama with gambling moguls, whether it be Paul Bryant Jr. with Green Track or Milton McGregor down at Victoryland. We had indictments related to, I think it was the horse track in Birmingham. You've got the gambling facility down in Mobile. And they seem to, more often than not, end up having a disproportionate amount of political influence, not only over their local elections, but sometimes they're converted into statewide kingpins because of the huge financial resources that they have that regular Alabama citizens do not.
I mean, I've covered elections for 16 years, and I've done article after article where I pull the Secretary of State's report, and X candidate has 55,000 in their account, and they've got 75,000 in contributions. They've got so much, in debt versus candidate Y who's got X, Y, Z. That is like absolutely meaningless when you've got people buying ads that aren't going through the candidate, when you're just completely outside the realm. I mean, Bill Morris came to me, a week ago and said, Brandon, I have no idea who these people are. All of a sudden, these mailers came out and all these ads on YouTube. Do you know who they are? And could you find out? I mean, they just stepped into that race, and I guess it's a coincidence they're backing the Speaker of the House as candidate. But all of a sudden they threw like 100,000 into a race, and none of that shows up on any campaign finance reports. It just all of a sudden it was in mailboxes and on YouTube.
Well, in my election, House District 20 in Huntsville, there have been at least 7 or 8 mailers by the American Conservative Fund that are illegal on their face because they don't properly identify all the information that is required with respect to the American Conservative Fund. I mean, there might be more than one American Conservative Fund in the United States. It's kind of a common name, okay? And so you have to give things like address, street address, city, state, whatever is necessary to make sure that we're talking about the correct entity when we talk about whoever it is that has been sending out these campaign mailers. But 7 or 8 mailers in a little old legislative race is pretty significant. And then our campaign has discovered that the American Conservative Fund, on behalf of gambling moguls, has also purchased over $200,000 in TV ads. Now, we don't know that because the American Conservative Fund has been complying with our disclosure laws in Alabama, because they haven't. We know that because one of our volunteers, Kathy Murray, called up the local TV stations, and they have a lawful obligation to release to the public political ad buys. And so, not counting all the stations, but some of the 4 TV stations that we have in Huntsville, Alabama, 3 of them reported $210,000 in expenditures by these out-of-state gambling moguls that is laundered in such a fashion and in such a way as to try to fool voters into thinking there's something they are not. For example, in a Republican primary, the name American Conservative Fund is probably a pretty good name to go with.
Yeah.
Okay, that can influence the credibility of whatever the attack ad may be. That can influence the desire of voters to vote a certain way or not. But if you point out that they are in fact not an American, not a conservative fund, instead that they are gambling moguls from out of state, then it becomes a liability on the part of the candidate that they are trying to help, because a lot of voters are going to be alienated by that. They want moral values, not immoral values. And certainly in this instance, we ought to at least expect compliance with our state law. For example, I saw an article earlier this week. I haven't verified it myself, so I don't know if it was accurate. But that article reported that the American Conservative Fund is complying with the disclosure requirements in North Carolina, but they're not in Alabama. What the heck's going on in the Attorney General's office or the Secretary of State's office or in any of the district attorney's offices that could investigate and prosecute this matter?
Do you think something could be that I found out that Chief Counsel Catherine Robertson, who's running for Attorney General, she's received money from the SVMB PAC after Sports Betting Alliance had made a $250,000 donation to them.
Wow, that's not good.
That was in December, and in January she received, I think it was $25,000 or $30,000 from SVMP after Sports Betting Alliance had donated $250,000 into that PAC.
Well, all of this, the public can decide. I had my reaction, but the public can decide for themselves whether it's good or bad, okay? But they can't do that unless you disclose it. And if the Sports Betting Alliance or American Conservative Fund is going to participate in some of the elections involving, say, the United States Senate or Attorney General or various district attorneys' offices around the state, then that's very much problematic, because those are our enforcement arms. And if you don't have enforcement of the law, you may as well not have the law. Now, let me give you a little bit of background. I was very much involved in the passage of the Fair Campaign Practices Act as a legislator. I've got a plethora of newspaper articles that talk about my role, including the maneuvering of, I was in the minority party back then, of maneuvering the Democrats into a position where they just about had to pass it, or else they would be embarrassed statewide and it might adversely affect them in some of their future elections. And it was not my intent that someone like the American Conservative Fund could get away with what they are doing, that these out-of-state gambling moguls could get away with what they are doing. To me, we've got to have prosecutors who get on the ball and will do the ethical thing, and first and foremost, warn American Conservative Fund that they better start complying with our law. They're going to be prosecuted, or in the alternative, just go ahead and initiate the prosecution. It's their obligation to comply with our Fair Campaign Practices Act if they're going to engage in campaign activity here in the state of Alabama. And they've clearly done both. And they know that there are some kind of reporting requirements because the American Conservative Fund has registered as a political entity with the Alabama Secretary of State. And that one registration triggers these disclosure requirements under the Fair Campaign Practices Act that the American Conservative Fund has chosen to thumb its nose at.
Congressman, have you ever heard of another? I mean, you said somebody from Europe being involved in one of our trying to influence our races.
That is correct. They are one of the entities that make up the Sports Betting Alliance, one of the gambling mogul entities.
I've gotten
The name of it is Bet365.
Bet365. Okay.
I've gotten 2 of these flyers that actually were sent to my house. We've got it as paid for by American Conservative Fund, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee, and it's coming from 60 Chelsea Corners PME 2026, Chelsea, Alabama. Have we found out anything about that address?
So that's news to me. I've got some.
Yeah, these 2 are addressed.
Pardon?
These 2 are addressed where they've got, where they actually stamped on.
Well, then they're
where it's supposedly coming from.
Then they're complying with the identification requirements of the Fair Campaign Practices Act if they give the name, the street address, the city, and the state. That's full compliance. But the ones I've been seeing are not like that one.
I've tried to call Brian Smith several times, and the phone number that he's using is one of these Google Voice numbers.
It's about like the address they use up in Alexandria, Virginia. If you look it up on Google Maps, it comes out as a Staples business supply store. So I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if that's a Google error or if really American Conservative Fund is operating out of a Staples business supply store.
I mean, if the American Conservative Fund, we know they've spent $2 million. There's no telling what they'll spend between now and the primary, and then we don't know what DraftKings will put up under another name. When they try to help Democrats in, the general election, presumably if some anti-gambling Republicans get through.
Yeah, who knows how that's all.
But if you're willing to spend $2.5, $3 million for a corporation, how much money do you think you're going to make by whatever legislation that your friendly politician you're hoping will pass? That's a big investment for even a national company.
Well, the Small Business Alliance has, if I recall correctly, publicly stated that they are anticipating that this is one of their sales points, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for various government entities. Okay, now I don't know if that's puffery, if it's accurate, if it's a misquote, or what. But nonetheless, if there is the potential of making hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue, you can bet your bottom dollar that they are anticipating making a whole lot more for the internet sports betting and internet casinos that they intend to operate.
On April 6th, I believe, with the financial disclosures, there was a $650,000 donation made in SVMP from Sports Betting Alliance. Do you anticipate more of these types of moves as we get closer to the election?
None of them would surprise me. The one thing that has surprised me is, quite frankly, some research that you did that I missed. It didn't occur to me to check the North Alabama Political Action Committee. And lo and behold, it it reveals that the Sports Betting Alliance is laundering money not only through the SV&B PAC, which is 1.9 million that we've been able to itemize so far, but they're also laundering another $250,000 through the North Alabama Political Action Committee that is located here in Huntsville, Alabama, and run by Steve Raby, who is the chief lieutenant of the House Speaker, Nathaniel Ledbetter. And that one was a surprise. It's one thing to operate through a lobbyist office. It's another thing to operate through a person who is the number one lieutenant of the Speaker of the House of Representatives in the state of Alabama.
I think in 2010 or sometime before then, we passed a law banning PAC-to-PAC transfers. We're seeing money move from one fund to another fund and then get distributed to candidates. How is that not a violation of the PAC-to-PAC transfer law?
Well, that's
Or is there some loophole I'm missing?
That's a very good question that your judicial system ought to ask and later on provide an answer for. We do have a ban on PAC-to-PAC transfers. Now, to me, what's really sordid, the laundering, of course, is sordid, but what's really sordid is the Sports Betting Alliance can make contributions directly. DraftKings can make money contributions directly. They don't have to launder the money through these political action committees, but it's quite evident that they launder the money through the political action committees because they want to deceive the public as to who's behind the money. Again, going back to the name American Conservative Fund, in a Republican primary, you get an ad as a Republican primary voter from the American Conservative Fund, and that immediately elevates the credibility of whatever that ad says, just because of the name. I wish it wasn't that way, but that's the way voters often react to these things. You certainly would get a different reaction if you were to identify it as gambling mogul. So part of it is a marketing purpose, part of it is a deceit purpose. But you're right. On the PAC-to-PAC transfer side, this is going from DraftKings to another PAC, Win for America, to another PAC, American Conservative Fund, and it's strictly for use in the state of Alabama. The money from the very beginning is funneled with the express intent, in my judgment, express intent for it to be spent in the state of Alabama. And it's a lot different from, say, what the Sports Betting Alliance is doing, where they're contributing to campaigns. That's more of a traditional type of way of funding these types of endeavors. With the American Conservative Fund, they are actively campaigning when they purchase these mass mailers that cost maybe $5,000, $10,000 a piece. They're actively campaigning when they reserve hundreds of thousands of dollars at TV stations with which to run ads that pound one opponent and deify the other candidate who's running. Same thing with the texting that is occurring. That's occurring right now as we speak in any number of races across the state of Alabama. I know it's happening in the House District 20 race that I'm involved in. And all of this is just really sordid. And it's all to promote four things. We're real clear about those four things, okay? One thing is online sports betting. And if you're familiar with online sports betting, what we're really talking about is creating an incentive for corrupt people to buy basketball game outcomes. And you've seen that in the recent federal indictments that have come down, where 26 people, 20 of whom were basketball players, were indicted for game fixing. They were paid $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 per game that they intentionally lost for the team that they were playing for, betraying their players, betraying their school, but doing it for the mighty dollar. Okay, that's the problem with sports betting. I don't want any more corruption in NCAA athletics. And it's starting to ruin NCAA athletics for a number of people, particularly when it comes out that it's no longer the best team or the best coaching that wins these games. It's which players were bought by these gamblers who want to fix games and which ones were not. But sports betting is one, online sports betting. The other is online casinos. I think you're foolish to participate in betting against the house online, more so than you're foolish to vote to bet against the house at an actual brick and mortar casino. But hey, that's your choice if that's really what you want to do. The third thing is, and these two, by the way, are promoted as the goals of the Sports Betting Alliance on their website. So that's not Mo Brooks speaking about their goals. That's them speaking about their goals. The third goal, which is the insight that I offer from having been involved in politics, having interacted with these gambling interests for a significant period of time, is they want brick and mortar casinos in the state of Alabama, with the number one target being Huntsville, Alabama, where there's a tremendous amount of wealth that they would like to take out of the state of Alabama. And then the fourth thing that they want, in my judgment, is no consumer protection laws. And I'll give you an example of an obvious one. Let's say that you've just bet on a basketball game and you lose your money. And then it comes to light that the game was rigged by gamblers who had bought off players. Should you get a refund? That's a consumer protection law that ought to be discussed in the legislature and determine what Alabama public policy is going to be. In my mind, if you bet against the house or you participate in one of these bets and you lose because of illegal activity, then you should get your money back, particularly when it's gamblers who have rigged the game that you just lost your money at. You should get your money back. But I'm pretty sure that the Sports Betting Alliance and DraftKings up in Boston, they don't want any consumer protection laws of substance in any way, shape, or form, because consumer protection laws, by definition, protect the consumer, which means you're reducing the profits that these gambling moguls hope to get from our state.
Congressman, with now I was trying to find the text where I've seen they're sending out for Garland Gudger, and we have the like I said, the Speaker of the House is number 2 man. Is this? I mean, I hate to be conspiratorial, but is this a conspiracy to try to get sports betting in Alabama through these legislators?
Well, we can call it a conspiracy, or we can call it a coordinated activity, whatever you want to call it. It is happening. Okay. No question that the gambling moguls have decided that they can reach out to and influence the House Speaker's office and the House Speaker's close political companions in a significant way, and that they can also influence legislators in a significant way. If you go to the SVNB PAC, by way of example, and look at their expenditures, there are dozens and dozens of legislators that these gambling moguls either are trying to influence, or they believe they already have a quid pro quo, the promise of a vote, and they're throwing money at to ensure that they get elected because they're a guaranteed vote for various forms of legalized gambling come the next session of the Alabama legislature. And you can have a public policy debate about whether this legalized gambling is good or bad. There are two different viewpoints on that. But there should be no debate on the scurrilous, sordid way in which these gambling moguls are going about trying to buy votes, to buy legislators throughout the state of Alabama. That is horrible on any issue, not just gambling mogul issues, but on any issue. It's a corruption of the public policy debate that the people of the state of Alabama should in no way, shape, or form tolerate.
We've seen millions of dollars pumped into this state from out-of-state gambling interests when they're currently gambling is illegal in Alabama. If we made gambling illegal in Alabama, how much money would these interests pump into these races trying to control the legislature that regulates them if we actually passed it, 4 years from now?
That's what I'm talking about with kingpins like Milton McGregor or Paul Bryant Jr. or the folks who own the Birmingham racetrack, or the folks who are involved in the South Alabama, Mobile area racetrack. The owners of these institutions, of any gambling institution, typically, the house always wins, okay? So there's a very large revenue stream, typically, not always, but typically there's a large revenue stream that goes with ownership of a monopoly gambling enterprise in a particular part of the state of Alabama. And with that revenue stream, you're able to have huge impact on local and state elections. So once you've opened that barn door and the animals get out, it's a lot harder to put them back in. And once this gambling scheme becomes law, if it does, then you may as well forget about it. These gambling moguls from out of state and even overseas in Europe, they're going to have a disproportionate influence over Alabama politics for decades to come. And if they're going to have a disproportionate amount of influence because of the money that they now have at their disposal that they can invest in order to further their profit-making schemes, and they invested, of course, by large contributions in favor of one candidate or against another. The flip side of that coin is that there is now less influence by the citizens of the state of Alabama over who our own elected officials are.
So we see all this money being put in by, the sports betting and that. Are you surprised that there's that much gambling money here in Alabama that they would make this kind of investment?
No, I'm not. Okay. There are people who love to gamble. And let's say you and I want to gamble on the Iron Bowl. That's legal under Alabama law. I've been known to bet myself on occasion. For example, I bet on a presidential race issue a couple of years ago, and I won me a Dairy Queen ice cream cone, a dip cone, which I might add, the other guy hasn't paid back yet. So I might have to go hire Joe, the arm breaker, to get my Dairy Queen dip cone that I've been waiting for over a year.
And they're good.
We'll see how it all plays out. I just hope the voters, if the media will do its job, then the voters will know what's at stake, and I think they'll make a wiser decision, and we'll see what the voters want to do with that better information as they try to make that wiser decision. But if you deny them the information and you do it by violating Alabama law, that's wrong, that's bad, and it hurts our republic.
On your point about gambling corrupting the sports that we watch, I covered a story, I want to say about 3 years back, 2 or 3 years back, where the University of Alabama head baseball coach placed a bet through a guy in Ohio against his own team. He put in the starting lineup his ace pitcher, and then at the last minute scrubbed him for a guy off the back of the bench who hadn't played in a while. And of course the Tide lost and the bet paid out. Fortunately, they got greedy and they laid a 6-digit bet on Alabama baseball in an Ohio casino, which set off alarms at the casino. So they were like, who is betting this kind of money on a game, and who is he talking to? So when the guy came to collect the money, they grabbed that cell phone from him and said, who were you talking to? And it traced back to the University of Alabama baseball.
Well, that's kind of an interesting story that you just told, how quick the casinos are to react when someone's trying to cheat them of money, and how slow they are to react when they're cheating somebody else of money.
Yeah, they don't want to lose money now.
No, it's a rigged game. If you're betting against the casino, you're going to lose. It's just a matter of how long it takes to lose it.
So, Congressman, I mean, it's been almost 30 years since we had a vote on a lottery, and every few years people talk about that. How did we get to the point to where no longer talking about a lottery, but now we're wanting sports betting in here? Is it because of these big gambling?
Absolutely, $3 to $4 million in state legislative and statewide races here in Alabama. That can very quickly change the discussion topic.
Getting off of this topic a little bit, and I sort of experienced this today. Getting around the state, we've had a lot of growth in North Alabama, and then in further south, and Baldwin County, and the far end of South Alabama. I-65 has gotten to really be I mean, if you've driven it today versus 10 years ago, it's got to be really rough out there. Is there any money in the state or the federal budget to do something about widening more portions of that? I know there's a stretch of it going on between Calera and Alabaster.
There is plenty of money. The issue is not the money. The issue is the priorities and where to place the money. And that's all up to Governor Ivey and the Department of Transportation director. The legislature, by and large, does not vote on which projects get funded. And so whatever the priorities of the governor happen to be, that's where the money's going to go. And you've seen that with this Western highway that runs north-south through practically unpopulated areas or lightly populated areas, when that money could instead go to help relieve some of the traffic congestion that involves 100 or 1,000 times more people. But it's up to the governor. That's the discretion that the legislature has granted to the governor's office. And unless the legislature takes it back, it's going to continue to be 100% controlled by the governor of the state, whoever that governor may be.
Congressman, hypothetically speaking, let's say that all the candidates that American Conservative Fund and the gambling moguls back win. Do you think in the next session we're going to see a push to legalize sports betting?
Oh, that and a bunch of other bad things, and absolutely yes. Historically, the way the four-year term works is legislatures do their bad things, dirty things, the things that the public doesn't like in year one or year two of the four-year session. Then when you get to the third year where you're getting closer to elections, where the voters may actually remember what you've done that is wrong, come the fourth year, the legislature tends to be a little bit more neutral and try to minimize the bad things that they're going to do. And then in the fourth year, they try to make everything they do smell like roses. That is the nature of the four-year cycle. And so next year and the year after that, with this new legislature, if there's bad things to be done, that's when they will try to do it, because that then gives them time to recover before the voters decide to send them home by defeating them in the next elections.
Mr. Brooks, in this past legislative session, the legislature, in its wisdom, decided to replace the 3-member elected Public Service Commission with an energy secretary appointed by the governor and 7 elected commissioners, 4 of which will be appointed by Kay Ivey, in July. And all of, the 3 that are running, the 2 that are running, I guess the 3 that's there, well, the 2 that are running and the one that was previously appointed, they've all had their term stretched to 6 years instead of the 4-year election cycle we have been doing. Was this an effort on the behalf of Alabama Power because they didn't like the 2 members that were running, that were probably going to get elected just in this cycle?
I haven't thoroughly researched this issue. I don't know from research who the players actually are behind the scenes and what their motivations are. I'm not now a legislator, so that also deprives me of some of the insider information that would illuminate what's really going on and what, again, those motivations are for what's going on. So I'm much like you. I've got a lot of questions. I don't have any answers. And I suspect we, the people, aren't going to get any answers. We're just going to see how it plays out.
I think we got now 5 weeks to go before the primary. How are you feeling about your race?
Feeling pretty good. We're being horribly outspent, probably 6-1, 7-1, maybe 8-1. But I've put in over 200 miles going door to door, and I think that makes a difference. I'm meeting people regularly inside the district, and when I go door to door, the reception, quite frankly, has been pretty doggone good. But I don't have access to any polling data. My campaign has not done any polls. We don't have the money for all this fancy micro targeting stuff that you do over the internet or with text messaging. And so we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. But this outside the state of Alabama gambling mogul money has really provided an unexpected twist in the disparity between the two campaigns' financial support.
Congressman Brooks, we've had an issue with the the diesel prices have suddenly gone way up because of the Iraq War, and the fertilizer prices were already way up because of the sanctions against Russia, and then our commodity prices are real low because of the president's tariffs. Are we looking at where our farmers are really going to get hammered unless something changes suddenly here in the next year or two? And is there anything the Alabama legislature can do about it? Or is it just
Well, there's a
entirely a
tremendous
federal
amount
deal?
of uncertainty in all aspects of the United States economy right now, in large part because of the tariffs that have not yet had the time to trickle down to long-term policy implications. Right now, we're still in the short-term policy implications time frame. And then you add on to that the uncertainty surrounding the Iran war. We don't know how that's going to end up. The only thing we know so far short term is that gasoline prices have gone up roughly $1 or more per gallon. And when energy prices go up, that affects the pricing of everything, because everything that is produced in the United States of America or even overseas, it involves energy. And when the energy prices go up, the cost of those goods have to go up, and to a lesser degree, probably the cost of services also go up because of the higher embedded energy costs. So it'll take some time for all of that to work its way through the economy for us to have a good retrospective idea of what went right and what went wrong.
Do you foresee a bad time at the box for the incumbent or Congress this year with what's going on right now in the world?
Every single indicator looks really bad for the Republicans in Congress and really good for the Democrats. By indicators, there are a number of things that you can look at. By way of example, there have been a lot of special elections involving legislators or congressmen or other officials. And of all of the seats that have changed hands from one party to another, 100% of them have gone from Republican to Democrat. Okay, it's not the mix that you would normally expect. It's been a total landslide in favor of the Democrats in terms of party switching seats in these special elections. So that's not good. Then you've got that it is a midterm for a president. Historically, the president's party in midterms doesn't do too well. So they add that on top of it. Then all of a sudden, inflation has started to rear its ugly head, and voters tend to hold the party in power responsible for inflation, just as they do for the economy as a whole, just as they do for unemployment rates and things of that nature. And those numbers are mediocre at best. And, you can go down issue after issue after issue and factor after factor after factor. And I don't know of a single factor that falls in favor of the Republicans. So maybe some good things will happen for Republicans over the next 7 months, 6 months, as the case may be. But that's what it's going to take, some really big changes for the Republican Party to be competitive in this election cycle. Otherwise, you're probably looking at Hakeem Jeffries being Speaker of the House. And we saw what happened with Nancy Pelosi becoming Speaker of the House in 2018. That pretty much ended the 4-year term of Donald Trump in terms of getting policies through the United States Congress that are consistent with his value system. Nancy Pelosi put a halt to that in 2019. And then you're apt to see the same thing if Hakeem Jeffries becomes Speaker of the House because of a landslide election in favor of the Democrats. Now, maybe things will turn and we still have elections that are 6 months away, 7 months away, but those are the indicators at this point, and they just don't look good for Republicans. Look great for Democrats. I hope things will change.
This is getting a little bit far afield here, but you served in the Congress with Congressman Eric Swalwell out in California. I mean,
did.
the allegations against him, I don't want to comment on it, but it seems pretty horrific what he's being accused of. Should he be run out of Congress for this, or should we just let the courts do the courts thing? Wait.
Well, there are three things that have happened. First, you've had all these allegations. He's dropped out of the California governor's race. And from what I hear today, he has made the announcement that he's dropping out of the United States Congress.
Oh, okay.
It couldn't happen to a more deserving guy. And I say that because he personally sued me when I was in the United States Congress, falsely claiming that I had caused the attack on the Capitol. Fortunately, a Barack Obama United States federal court judge had the case and looked at all the evidence and rendered a decision dismissing Eric Swalwell's suit against me because, as the federal judge stated, there was no plausible argument that could be advanced that he had any grounds for a recovery. So it was a slam dunk verdict by the judge in my favor without even a trial. But still, I had to go through with it. And what Eric Swalwell was trying to do, quite frankly, was not get a money judgment against me, although he would have liked one. What he was trying to do was use the judicial system to engage in what we call in politics now lawfare, to diminish my reputation in order to make it harder for me to be elected to the United States Senate. And he was successful in that regard. It did have an adverse effect on my Senate race. How much, I don't know. But having said all that, I'm rather pleased that Eric Swalwell is no longer going to be running for governor and will be out of the United States Congress. If not already, then soon. Congress will be a better place without him. Oh, I'd be remiss if I didn't add, don't forget Fang Fang, the communist Chinese spy that he, by all accounts, had a sexual relationship with and who was a principal fundraiser for him. And later on, Eric Swalwell is on the House Intelligence Committee, which is privy to the most secret information that the Department of Defense, or now Department of War, is willing to share with the United States Congress. And Eric Swalwell's relationship with Fang Fang, the House Intelligence, and everything else. America's better served with Eric Swalwell no longer in office.
Congressman, as we get closer now, are you anticipating Yellowhammer News to start running their hit pieces on you like they usually do?
Well, they usually do. So I'm expecting it. I'm expecting everything in the kitchen sink to be thrown at me. The nice thing about being retired and having been through these kind of political wars before is it's like water off a duck's back. Okay. It's going to happen. I don't know how scurrilous the attacks are going to be, but it's going to happen. And the nice thing about it in 2022, when it did happen in a lot of variety of different ways, we still carried House District 20 here in Huntsville, Alabama. In the face of all those things, $40 million against us, Katie Brett, who herself has the appearance of being a good candidate, okay? She was no slouch as a candidate, certainly. Then you've got Donald Trump flip-flopping, as Donald Trump is apt to do. You've got all sorts of accusations that come out. And the voters of House District 20 knew me well enough to still give me a majority of the vote, although it was close, in that United States Senate primary. Now, this time you've had 2 years in which the voting population changes a little bit. Memories have faded a little bit, and we'll just have to see how things play out. And but I like our campaign over the next 35 days. We have mapped it all out. What information is going to go out when, and I am very confident that unless this $700,000 or so of special interest political action committee money damages me severely in some way, primarily because we wouldn't have the ability to respond. That's the only thing we're concerned about. We don't have that kind of money when we're being outspent this bad. But barring something really dramatic like that, I think we'll be just fine on Election Day.
I'll tell you something funny. I heard the other day somebody said they had um,
Are there
one of
any
these
debates planned between you and?
No.
um, that there was some kind of research opposition group that had went back and investigated you all the way back since you was in middle school. And I was thinking, this guy's been in politics for 50 years. I mean, I don't know what you're going to find from him in sixth grade that's going to damage his campaign now.
Hey, I've been vetted many times, and I will add one of the more out there accusations. In one of the campaigns, one person said that I had murdered my first wife and stuffed her into a chimney. Okay, and when it got to the point of when it happened, it turns out I was about 12 or 13 years old, so I had a pretty good defense. And I've been married just one time, and my wife and I we've loved each other for decades, and I don't see that changing.
Congressman, we've held you up for nearly 55 minutes now.
All right.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we've covered it. We'll see if you guys are actually able to magnify our three voices in such a fashion that more and more Alabama voters know what's truly going on with this gambling mogul mess. I'm beginning to suspect that some of the news media outlets that would normally cover a story of this magnitude, that they might be getting money from these gambling moguls. And I wouldn't put it past the gambling moguls to put in significant advertising dollars or something with some of these other media outlets in an effort to try to damp down their enthusiasm about talking about or publishing what I believe is one of the biggest political stories in the state of Alabama in the last few decades.
Yeah, that kind of crossed my mind today too, because I talked to every news station in the state and told them what I had and sent them stuff over, and I'm still waiting to hear anything back from them.
Well, in Huntsville, you've got American Conservative Fund that is buying 200 and something $1,000 worth of TV ads.
Mm.
They won't need that money. Now, is that influencing their news departments? I don't know. But I would think that the local news stations, particularly since one of the players, the North Alabama PAC, is in Huntsville, would see it as a statewide story and a local story and run with it. But it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, this was our number one story today, far and away. It just went right up the leaderboard pretty quick. Not one phone call from any of my colleagues asking questions about anything.
Well, is cited, very well sourced, and you can, the public or an adversary can disagree with some of the opinions and conclusions, but there should be no dispute about the money laundering and that it's coming in two different tranches. One, $2.15 million minimum through the through, I keep wanting to say Small Business Association because that's SBA, through the Sports Betting Alliance, because these are all government documents that add up to 2.15 million. Okay. The only factual ambiguity I'm aware of has to do with the magnitude of the American Conservative Fund. And that uncertainty is because the American Conservative Fund has decided to thumb its nose at Alabama law and has to date refused to file any of the disclosures that would help the public better understand what's really going on.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank you so much for
Congressman.
being on.
All right. Y'all take care.
All right. Good luck.